This is a video of how Yuji and Ichigo saved Shonen. I'm guessing in terms of like characters because before that you always had like characters like Naruto where they always had lofty ideals and was always in the right and always wanted to do the right thing. Ichigo is somewhat like that, but he is more towards the side of protecting his friends. Like he doesn't have a lofty goal of like becoming a captain or he doesn't want to tear down the society that the Soul Society has built up to make like a new one. Doesn't want to do any of that, so he doesn't have lofty ideals or like goals. He literally just wants to save his friends or like protect them. Yuji, he's in a very similar boat, but at the same time he's very different. He just wants to die on his own terms, set like I think I can't remember what. God, I don't remember the first season of JJK that well. Well, the first couple of episodes. But it's something along those lines. So it's a lot different in terms of like what we normally have as for like shonen, where it's the characters always want to be the best in their entire verse. They want to be the Hokage, they want to be the Wizard King, they want to do this and that and this and that. So I do think having characters like Yuji, Ichigo, Denji, it just gives it a shonen a bit of spice, different flavors. So we're just gonna jump in here and see.
Yuji and Ichigo are great protagonists. They also happen to come from Jujutsu Kaisen and Bleach, two great series that have anime airing right now. So just like I have in the past with Yuji and other protagonists, I want to look at what he and Ichigo both do in order to...
People are not happy with the new JJK opening because the hidden inventory arc, fabulous opening. One of the best openings in anime right now. And then they fucking screwed it up with the new opening and people are not happy. I've heard lots of people very much hate it and lots of people are like, it's okay. The more I listen to it, the better it gets, but it's still not the best. So it's like, I find it in such a fucking, it's so weird. Me personally, it's okay, I still prefer the other one, but it's fine,
garner the favor
you can always just skip
of
over
so
it.
many people. And by the end of the video, I'd like to give you an answer to why we love Yuji and Ichigo.
People do not love Yuji. They would rather have Megami or Gojo as the main protagonist. The only thing that made Yuji interesting for a lot of people is that he had Sukuna. And later on, at the end of this coming up arc, it's going to be but that said, Yuji does change a lot in this arc coming up in the anime, so people might have a different opinion on him. Me, personally, I enjoyed Yuji. He was fucking amazing. His whole personality, I loved it, man.
I've talked about Yuji and Ichigo individually on the channel before. I've even talked about Yuji and Denji and what makes them so likable, but the interesting thing about discussions,
Denji is the most relatable anime character ever.
You can always plug in
because he's literally you when you were a teen. He has the powers that almost any teen boy would ever want, and he has the ideals that any teen boy would ever want. And his character development is god tier, man.
Different information and get a completely different conclusion. With Yuji and Ichigo, particularly as a pair, I will say one common point that they have that I really enjoy is their goals. They aren't the same per se, but they do somewhat mirror one another. In the same way, becoming the #1 hero, becoming the Wizard King, and becoming the Hokage all exist in the same dimension. Yuji and Ichigo's overarching goals are quite similar when put side to side. Ichigo doesn't want to become the Soul King or Captain Commander of the Gote 13. He just wants the strength to protect all of his loved ones without trouble.
Because he has PTSD of his mom dying.
The enjoyment of fighting in the pursuit of strength is something that Ichigo must strive for his entire journey throughout the series, and Yuji seems to be going down a very similar path. Rather than wanting to become the strongest sorcerer, Yuji wants to save people, die a proper death, and make sure to take Sukuna with him. The most obvious connection between these two that you can make is their desire to save people, and in both instances, that desire comes from a rather unhealthy place. And while we'll talk about the tragic core of their characters later in this video, even the fact that neither of these two have overtly ambitious attitudes is a connection that can be made between them that isn't found in every other protagonist. Now, oftentimes, especially with Ichigo, people mistake a lack of bold declarations for having no goals, no dreams.
If you compare him to his like, to like the other big three anime, Naruto, One Piece, yes, his goals isn't lofty, it isn't big, he doesn't have a big dream, but that's what makes him very relatable, because not Ichigo is more like he's more like prone to like teenagers, you know, that grew up with like a hard life, while Naruto and One Piece is more aimed towards kids and teens that want to do big things in the world. That is what those animes are driven towards. Ichigo, on the other hand, is more driven towards, you know, kids that had very rough childhoods growing up, you know, maybe divorced parents, maybe a parent died too young and that affected the kid, or, you know, just very unstable childhood environments, in my opinion. Because I actually prefer Ichigo in terms of a character a lot more. I love Luffy. He in terms of funniness, I prefer him. In terms of like who I like want to be like, it is somewhat towards Naruto, because I want to have big dreams, I want to accomplish my dreams. But I tend to be more like Ichigo, because I want to make sure my family is happy, my dad, my mom, you know, all of those. Why? Because they've helped. They gave birth to me, man. They've let me do so much in life that I didn't think I would be able to, man. It's just, I tend to be more like Ichigo.
And no ambitions. And while on a surface level, I could see how one would perceive Ichigo and Yuji as such, when peeling back the layers of both of their characters, or even just acknowledging what has to change about both of them in order to achieve their larger objective, you can tell that Ichigo and Yuji alike do have very obvious goals. They are simply achieved and sought after in a very roundabout way. For these two, strength is just a means to an end. Fighting is just a means to an end. Violence is just a means to an end. Neither of these two particularly seek out conflict, and neither of them want to have to fight to grow stronger, but the fact of the matter, especially in their universes, is that they do. Being able to protect or save people requires strength. True strength is honed in battle, and in order to survive battle, you must be ready for it at all times. This is why Yuji asked for Gojo to make him strong. This is why Ichigo asks Zangetsu for strength. Through their sufferings and hardships, they realize that enveloping themselves in conflict for the sake of others is the only way to preserve their safety. Yuji loses to the like of the finger bearer cursed spirit and has to rely on Sukuna's strength to bail him out. Ichigo loses to Ukiura, and then he has to rely on the hollow power to bail him out both times. All of these moments were caused by a lack of ability on the protagonist's part, and because of that, they were punished. Ichigo's punishment came in the way of suppressing his own power and abilities because of his fear of letting White take over. Yuji's punishment came in the way of dying and being forced to make a binding vow with Sukuna. A large part of both of these characters' growth is predicated on their fundamental initial misunderstanding about what having their goal really means. Ichigo and Yuji both have a misconception about their own abilities and what is required of them in order to save and protect. This naivete is met with confrontation and forces them to change as a result. This is a concept that you'll find in just about any character with meaningful depth and development. The lie that a particular person believes must be corrected at some point in order for them to find the presented truth given to us through the narrative. Naruto needs to become an empathetic and respectable person to become the Hokage. It isn't simply about strength, nor is becoming the Hokage about gaining the acceptance of those around you. Being the Hokage means you are already accepted by those around you. Luffy needs to become stronger and a more competent leader to become the Pirate King. Freedom isn't simply granted to those who want it, it's taken by those who are strong enough to fight for it. In a similar fashion, Yuji and Ichigo both need to understand what has to happen in order for them to progress and get closer to their goals. This particular trajectory, the idea of a character who has to pick up a sword or swing their fist purely for the sake of others is really cool, and it's a massive reason that these two have a similar vibe to all of those who find themselves enthralled with both Bleach and Jujutsu Kaisen. Now, taking just a brief step back in tone before talking about a more serious character trait of theirs, I'd like to highlight a little connection I just caught while in the process of writing this video. I talked about Yuji and Ichigo's aversion to violence for the sake of violence, and that remains to be true. But it's also true that Yuji and Ichigo have been given very delinquent-like traits in their stories, and something about that is really funny. Gege is a pretty obvious and massive fan.
I honestly did not notice that before. That is actually well picked up.
Of Kubo, so I wouldn't be surprised at all if this was
That
intentional
is
on his
really
part to
surprising.
make these two similar in that aspect. Yuji and Ichigo's hair, for example, being bright fluorescent colors is something that is not...
Yeah, in Japan, it's more towards the delinquents because they want to rebel and stuff. Yeah, that's actually... Damn.
common in anime, but also in Japanese culture somewhat implies that they are rebellious in nature, in spite of orange and pink both being their natural colors. Even with the delinquent gag though, Gege and Kubo keep their respective characters consistent with the overarching narrative for them, as we only see the two characters get violent for the sake of others. Way before getting Shinigami powers or becoming the vessel for the King of Curses, these two were nice, naturally protective people.
Yeah, but Ichigo still bodied 5 people trying to save Chad, so that was... Yeah, he was saving Chad, yes, understandable, but he fucked up 5 people.
The story just grants them the ability to expand the range of their character over time. The fact that both of them really have hands without their powers, though, is also pretty cool. And speaking of hands, Ichigo and Yuji stand out in a series that have very complex and unique abilities. In a world of Gojos, Kisuke's, Megumis, and Mayuris, Ichigo and Yuji look extremely simple in comparison. These two...
The amount of people that complain that Ichigo just used one move for the entirety of Bleach is astonishing. That's why I think people didn't really like it that much, because granted, Naruto had the Rasengan, but he changed it from the basic Rasengan to the wind style Rasengan, and then he changed it to the Rasen Shuriken, and then he had the magnet, lava, tail beast bomb shurikens. So there was a bit of variety, but at the end of the day, it was still the same move. Bleach, Ichigo literally just has Zangetsu, or whatever the move is. So people found that very boring, and Itadori, for almost all of JJK, doesn't really have a moveset. He just has his hands, and he enhances his physical stats with cursed energy, and then he has the slight black flash, or whatever the fuck it's called, moments, and that's about it. I'm not going to spoil any further because, again, it's a spoiler, so... But yeah, for most of JJK, Itadori doesn't have any powers, so that's... Yeah, people found that very boring.
Two are the manga equivalent of having no bag. No dribble moves, no hezzy step back, no crazy layup package. They really just charge to the rim and dunk that shit. These two characters have such a shallow bag that would make Giannis proud. Yuji has hands with the occasional usage of Divergent Fist and Black Flash, and Ichigo's got sword slashes and Getsuga Tenshos. I like it, don't get me wrong, but man is it funny to think about that in the context of their stories. They really don't have any hacks whatsoever, and with Yuji, this may change later down the line in the manga, as Gege...
Ichigo has lots of hacks. I have to say you're wrong there, because he has both... He has the power of all 4 races, currently. Soul Reaper, Hollow, Quincy, and Human. Human? Fuck. Humans don't... okay. But He has Hollow powers, he has Quincy powers, and he has Soul Reaper powers. His Quincy powers um is like that defensive move. He's able to absorb reishi from the surrounding area. So that already makes him pretty damn like his hacks is actually quite high. You have to hand it to him there. Is it as high as other people or as strong as other people? Not really, but he has hacks. Don't
He
disrespect
has
it.
alluded to Yuji being able to develop Sukuna's technique later down the line, but as of right now, for 200 plus chapters of JJK in all of Bleach, have had the simplest of movesets. I know a lot of people don't really care for their simplistic abilities, but I think having the two main characters have to use their creativity and ingenuity in order to overcome techniques
Oh yeah,
that are
that's
significantly
brilliant.
better on paper is fun, and it can also act as a palate cleanser for the viewers whenever the fights in the series get a little too technical or too complex, and we just want to wash it down with some simplicity. If the average Bleach and JJK fight is a nice meal, it's a really and heavy filling one. And Ichigo and Yuji's relatively simple fighting styles act as a cool, refreshing beverage to wash down all of the complexity with. Very weird analogy, I know, but in manga like this, it's all about balance, and this is actually
I mean,
a writing.
it's very similar to when you're watching like an anime, like a drama anime, and 8 episodes is heavy drama and very complex storytelling, and then you get a beach episode. It's basically like that. The beach episode is to take your mind, like it's to cleanse your mind, it's to get it's to bring fun back into the anime for one episode before the final arc of the season happens, and then everything just gets so serious, man. That's exactly what Yuji and Ichigo's fights are supposed to be. Granted, their fights are normally high staked, but at the same time, it's like you said, it's a palate cleanser.
Trait that isn't limited to Kubo and Gege. Gon is also a protagonist that serves the exact same purpose. Anyone who's read Hunter x Hunter already knows how complex and detailed the power system.
I haven't read Hunter x Hunter, like Hunter x Hunter. I've watched the anime, the 2011 one, and I know exactly where to pick up the manga. I just haven't got around to reading it because, firstly, I don't want to get caught up and then I have to wait months, maybe a years, just to get like another chapter, and I don't want to start reading it now because there's lots of explanations going on. Like half of it, like more over 75% of what's left to read to get caught up is literally just reading very complicated text because it introduces so much new shit that they have to explain, and it just gets so complicated, and there's so much reading to do. Oh my god, man! So I just decided, you know what? I'll wait till the author eventually starts Hunter x Hunter again, and then I'll get to reading it then. You know.
Is, but in spite of this, in spite of the fact that Togashi has the ability to write some of the most intricately interwoven fights in shonen, he made Gon's Nen ability rock, paper, scissors. This is a choice that, intentional or not, means the reader can always expect some relief from ridiculously complex abilities and just see some people scrap. Maybe some think that Gege and Kubo didn't get this balance correct, and that is a discussion in and of itself, but I would say that Ichigo and Yuji fights are good enough on their own to be enjoyed in a vacuum, but they have the added benefit of switching things up at times when a reader may not want to see a bunch of Bankai or curse techniques that are complex. Sometimes I just want to see a big blast of energy, super speed, and martial arts in my battle manga, even if the stories are built around more complicated abilities. So the fact that these two characters are the primary mechanisms for me to get my simplicity fix is a surprisingly large contributing factor to what makes them so enjoyable. Yuji and Ichigo may be called bagless from time to time, but when their fights are some of the best in the entire series, it's kind of hard to say that that's a bad thing. But moving on to something with a little bit more substance to it, I'd like to talk about these two characters and how they personally respond to their antagonists. Many main characters do it differently or approach fighting a villain with a completely different ethos, but once again, Yuji and Ichigo's similarities shine when you look at this particular aspect of them. And the simplest way to put it is that they get led by the nose quite often. by their antagonists. At the end of the day, every main character has to be manipulated or influenced by their villains to some extent.
Obviously, because that builds character development.
But Ichigo and Yuji really get the short end of the stick in this department, and it's part of the reason that they are such interesting characters to read about. These two...
Aizen controlled almost everything in the first part of Bleach. Like, everything up until just before the Fullbringer arc, Aizen controlled everything. He's the reason why Ichigo has hollow powers. He's the reason why Ichigo got as strong as he did. He's the reason why Ichigo sacrificed his powers to beat Aizen. Yeah.
Really get manipulated and mentally picked apart by their villains on a
Yuji is obviously, everybody should know what's happening with Yuji, so
semi-regular basis, and it's kinda wild. For Ichigo, the main culprits of this are Aizen, Tsukishima, and Yuha. For Yuji, the main culprits are Mahito and Sukuna. They both face opponents that they can handle more straightforwardly, sure, but some of the greatest moments from Ichigo and Yuji come directly from chapters where they are just getting mentally body. Ichigo being told that his life was planned by Aizen, Sukuna ripping out his own heart and letting Yuji die, Ichigo having his family and friends turned against him.
That was a very, like, this scene here got me feeling all types of ways, man. Like, God, this one here hit me on an emotional level, man.
Yuji seeing Mahito kill Junpei, and so many more instances like this exist, and while they are almost always painful for the reader and for the characters, they also just happen to be great for the writing and for the narrative. Yuji and Ichigo are very steadfast characters, and they don't fall into despair so easily, so when Gege and Kubo really stack the odds against them enough to make them just lose all hope and resolve, you know that you are in a juicy part of the story, and you also know that something great is coming for them later. You can and should attribute a lot of this successful storytelling to their antagonists, by the way. This isn't all through Yuji and Ichigo's efforts alone, but they do benefit a lot from great characters like Aizen and Mahito continuously toying with them. They benefit both as characters and as people within their own world. They get knocked...
I mean, it's just like in real life where someone tells you in school that you're not going to end up as something great, you're not going to accomplish great things in your life, you're just gonna work at like a fast food restaurant for the rest of your life, and just like give out burgers and shit, and you know, you're gonna live a very depressing life, and then you turn around and say like, I will make something great of myself, and then you do the best you can in life, you catch a break, and you make millions, and then you prove that person wrong. It's basically like that.
Around so often by the story that sometimes you wonder if they can even get back up or ever come back from what they went through. Sometimes the answer is yes, but in a lot of cases the answer...
This moment here got me fucking hyped, man. All I thought about in that moment was beat the utter living shit out of Mahito, man. Beat his ass. Rip his ass in two, man.
Actually, no. Sometimes they are broken to a point where they do fundamentally change. To a point where the character that was broken and
Spoiler alert. Yuji goes through this in the upcoming arc.
discarded.
Not going to get more in depth, but yes.
Completely different person to the one that came back into the story. Just like Ichigo Zanpakuto in the 1,000-Year Blood War arc, he and Yuji can't always be fixed. Sometimes they must reforge their very being and come back as something entirely new. And this leads into what is, in my opinion, the greatest thing that these characters both do. Accept and grow. These three words encapsulate everything that I'm going to talk about in this portion of the video. All of the explaining, all of the analyzing, all of the examples given simply point back to that one phrase: accept and grow. This is what they are both able to do when confronted with the mental toying and manipulation that is present in the series. Now, I wanted to approach this video with as little spoilers for the JJK manga as possible, but when talking about conclusions to certain arcs concerning Yuji, it's almost impossible to do so without delving into spoiler territory.
Well, it's not going to be spoiler territory soon. The anime is finally getting to it, so I know this video is old, 2 weeks ago, so back then, yeah, the anime hasn't come back then. So right now we're getting into it. The battles is gonna be starting soon. Stuff is hyping up. Gojo is finally in Shibuya. Man, stuff's getting juicy.
So be warned, from this point on, JJK spoilers are on the table. That being said, when taking a look at Yuji's story with Mahito and how his narrative with Sukuna seems to be playing out, I'd consider
That's a massive spoiler right there, man. What
akin
the
to
fuck?
Ichigo's journey with Yuha and White. I know that within the context of Bleach, White isn't actually an enemy of Ichigo's, rather he is Ichigo himself, but earlier on in the story, he wasn't framed this way. He was framed as an unknown power within Ichigo that scared him, something he thought he had to suppress. Throughout the story though, those barriers slowly but surely get removed. It starts with Ichigo deciding to tame his power, and it progresses to him learning that the power he had been tapping into wasn't some separate entity, it was him all along. The power that he once feared, hated, and suppressed turned out to just be a part of himself. It was only after being tormented by his inability to accept reality that he realized ignoring part of his identity would not serve him in the long run.
And that's why he had to accept all of his like being, you know, Hollows, Quincy, and Soul Reaper. He had to accept his mother's death and that it wasn't his fault. He had to accept all of that to finally come to grasp that who he really is. That's basically it.
20 heritage in relation to Yuha. Both of these things coalesced in The Blade is Me, and it's hailed as one of the best parts of Bleach, specifically because it was here when Kubo tied together some long-running themes and concepts for Ichigo. To compare to Jujutsu Kaisen, this is essentially his I am you speech. For Yuji, his acceptance of himself is a little bit less literal, but he found it through hardship all the same. In Shibuya, Mahito and Sukuna really put him through the ringer. Sukuna kills hundreds of innocent people while piloting his body, Mahito kills Nanami and Nobara while severely handicapping Todo. When going even broader than
we still don't 100% know if she is dead. Like, yes, this looks very bad for her, don't get me wrong. And I do think she might be dead, like the possibility is very, very high. But the fact that no one really brought this up, like they mentioned it once after this, after the arc, but they didn't really get deep into it. Like they didn't have like a funeral. They didn't show anybody sad over it. You know, like what you normally do, because there was none of that. So maybe, just maybe, she might be alive, and just half her face is kind of fucked up, you know. But she's still there. She might come back in this last arc and kick some fucking ass, you know. It's what I'm hoping, but she might just be dead, and that's sad. That's very sad.
Just Mahito and Sukuna's actions, we know that Gojo was sealed by Kenjaku, and Choso defeated Yuji even after he strengthened his resolve. Two of his teachers are gone, Nobara is dead, hundreds of civilians were erased, and he suffered a crushing defeat, all in one night. All happening before Mahito just piles on and calls Yuji out for his hypocrisy. I've talked about this moment in Mahito's speech to Yuji many times before, and I'm sure that you know how this story goes. After getting help from Todo and his resolve being reinvigorated, Yuji is able to defeat Mahito, but before he does so, he acknowledges him as right. The hypocrisy that Yuji had been living in before is recognized, and he is able to admit that he and Mahito are the same. The cursed spirit that he hates more than almost anything in the world was correct about them being two sides of the same coin. He wanted to reject this horrible idea just like Ichigo, but in Jujutsu Kaisen, strength comes through acceptance, and Yuji needed that strength now more than ever in order to defeat his greatest foe. In the face of hopelessness, in the face of despair, Ichigo and Yuji can fail, they can waver, and they do many times in the series. Gege and Kubo both make it a point to show that they are human enough to completely fall apart sometimes. How they continue moving forward in spite of their despair is why we love Yuji and Ichigo.
He's not wrong.
If you enjoyed the video and want to see more like it, check out my other videos where I talked about why we love a specific character. I've done quite a few with Bleach and JJK characters specifically, and if there is one you'd like to see me talk about that I haven't already, let me know down in the comments. I got a couple more JJK and Bleach bangers for y'all soon, so subscribe to see those come out later. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.
Oh, it was a very good video. He really does do lots of research for these videos, man. This was thoroughly enjoyable. He actually delved very well into Ichigo's and Yuji's whole personality, man. This was fucking amazing. I hope you guys enjoyed, and see you guys next time.